believe it was because they weren't putting water on it. So if we have a fire, I don't know if you guys can see this, we'll call it on the B side, and we make entry on the A side. So this is self-vented. We've got fire coming out of this window. We open this door. Can we pressurize this with a fan to push the products of combustion out the window, the fire out the window, and come in and make an attack?
Not if you got open doors and all that.
Depends on what your
ventilation profile.
Yes, it's a positive pressure attack.
It's self-vented out the window.
It depends if it's unilateral or bilateral flow.
So the window's open. You've got the window's open. You know you have a flow path here. You stick the fan in. Can we fight that? A positive pressure attack, as Michael called it.
What's the size of the opening compared to the fire?
So there's greater than 2 times the opening.
Yeah. So that's the point. If we have a self-vented window, how much fire and heat we have in that room? A lot. So if you add pressure, if we look at this as a pressurized vessel, whatever it is, an air compressor, if it's already pressurized, so smoke and fire are filling this orifice, it can't ventilate this fast enough, right? There's not enough ventilation to open it. Can we add pressure to overcome already existing pressure to push it out the window? No. You cannot add more pressure to existing pressure to push it out the window. This room is already overpressured. So that's why the positive pressure ventilation attack does not work, because you already have pressure. You can't add pressure. Now, if we come down this hall, we squirt it, we take the heat out, we shrink it down, and we have a fan behind us 2 seconds later, that works great, right? Because we took the heat, we took the pressure out. Does that make sense to everybody?
No, I didn't hear a word you said.
Perfect. Don't worry, it's interior stuff. It's not. Skip that one. This is for you. This is BC stuff right here. So let me skip forward.
Can you full screen it?
I can't when I embed these up. I know I don't really like it. All right.
Click the bottom right button.
Yeah, it doesn't work because it's embedded in the PowerPoint. I haven't quite mastered this whole process yet.
Everybody can just
All right,
squeeze
we
it
can
close.
tell. So BC pulls up. He pulls up. He backs in over this. Gives a great size. Yeah, I think we got some fire. Initiating command. He gets out. Neighbor comes over. He goes, "That thing just exploded." And what does the BC do? He's looking at it. He's looking at it. He goes, "That thing just exploded out of the front of the house." And what's the BC do? Yeah, right. Oh, okay, we got this. Right? Right? All of us would, right? This looks good, right? We know the fire's here. It exploded, right? It probably, we had some popping or something the guy's talking about. There's no explosion. So let's backtrack.
Wait, was Schmickel driving the BC?
He was. He was. So nobody's here yet. Boom! Slow motion.
That lifted the whole roof off the house.
Yes, it did. Wow. Okay, so that happens.
Reason how clear it is.
For a second.
We better bump this up a little bit.
Everything goes away. Now the BC arrives, right? No big deal.
Look at the person go back.
No
in the
smoke.
house, yeah.
There was no explosion.
Don't go in there.
But there's a pop in there. You just open the front door.
I had a sandwich on there.
What do you do? I had a steak on
So this video is illustrating the importance of knowing the past of the fire. There's going to be indicators. There's gutters. This isn't East Pasco, so gutters are hanging off unordinarily. There's gutters in the front yard unordinarily, and there's smoke, soot, and stains all the way around the eaves where this fire came out of it. Right. So if we don't identify those things, and we go, all right, we're going offensive, Alfred and Charlie, we got a fire on the seaside, we're probably going to get some people killed. What was that event?
Smoke.
explosion.
Smoke explosion, so what happened? Looking at the fire, if we can get a guess at what probably happened.
Introduction of air.
Guy probably opened the front door.
Do you think it, so where was the smoke explosion at?
I think it was from C to A.
It's in the attic. So did the front door cause that? Could have, right? So not sure if it was air introduction or this attic, you've got an E fire, you fill this with smoke, and maybe it's on the C side, and then you got fire that breaks through, and you put heat to it. It's got the right ventilation in there, and it ignites. Maybe it's hot, it's full, and the guy opens the door, and that's enough to ignite it. We don't know, but either way, you got a attic full of smoke that gets its right oxygen, fuel, and heat profile, and it goes.
So what's the definition of a smoke explosion?
A smoke explosion is a wrap. Well, do I have it in here?
It's not in here.
It's not in there. Jeez.
So what's the difference between a smoke explosion and flashover?
Training issue. Flashover is going to be a rapid introduction where you already have heat and you already have fuel.
Well,
Smoke
if you have
explosion is
smoke,
generally
you
going
got
to be
heat.
you already have the fuel. You have the fuel and you have the ventilation profile. Usually we're going to introduce heat into that situation. So the fire breaches and boom, it goes. So that's one of the things we have a hard time controlling is we have to identify that we have that situation. Some of it we're not going to catch it. That's going to be something that we go in and we got an attic fire over our head. If we don't pull the ceiling and put water into it right away, then we're going to end up in that situation. And maybe we're not going to identify it.
A flashover, easy way to remember it is when a room goes from a fire in a room to a room on fire, and a smoke explosion doesn't necessarily have to be in a room that had a fire. It's in a path, or it can be in a path.
Yeah, sorry, did you say flashover or backdraft?
Flashover.
Okay, yeah, sorry. What Mike said. Flashover is when everything in the room reaches a simultaneous ignition. So there's no fuel in the attic other than smoke. That's the fuel. There's no fuel load in there. It's
So
the
what
smoke that
temperature did
ignites.
that smoke explosion probably get to?
Well, they used to always say CO was the ignition point. So CO ignites at 1128 degrees. And it has a huge flammable range, 11 to 74, right? So they always said probably CO igniting. The stuff that they found now is they just call it a gas ignition from, because they don't know. Because what happens when you light off this, and this, what smoke does it create? We don't know. It's kind of like Hanford when they mix, all these chemicals together. What does it create? They don't even know. So same thing with smoke. It has unpredictable.
Understanding what the building looks like.
So if you missed the conversation, Ken had said that they had tried this with some incipient and early growth stage fires, and it worked. And that, with talking about putting the PPV fan and the PPV attack, and he's absolutely right. If you have that dialed, it will work if the room is not overpressurized. And I don't want to get into a big discussion about this, but it's a finite room that we have. If we're wrong, we're going to pay for it big time. So he's absolutely right. It can be done, but there's a lot of things that have to be right for it to be done. So that's why typically that's not an attack that is chosen anymore. So flow paths, bidirectional versus unidirectional. What's the difference?
Contained to a box.
Contained to a box.
Where it's being
So not
So it doesn't have its own flow.
not bidirectional or unidirectional vents, flow paths.
Intake and exhaust.
Exactly.
Intake and exhaust is the same one. It's
So,
bidirectional.
I should have put these in a little bit different order.
That's contained to a box.
Okay, so bidirectional flow path. So you've got air coming in both sides. It could be one side, it doesn't matter. If it's one opening, it's the same. We just take this out of the equation. If it's two openings, the fire's in the middle, we're going to get this bidirectional flow path. Is this bad? Not really. This is what we typically have experienced in the past. Obviously, we're having changes in fuel, so it does make it more dangerous, but this is not an extremely accelerated flow path that we're talking about guys dying in. A unidirectional flow path of height change. This is the one where guys get killed before they know they're in a flow path. Grant asked the question, how do we know if we're in a flow path? you won't know because you'll be dead. That's the reality. Is if you don't identify it and size up, you won't know about it. By the time it hits you, it is too much. You can't come back from it. So this is a basement fire with a ventilated window where we didn't put water on it, and we open the first door. The fire goes up the stairs. This is too hot and too fast for us to combat. That's where we're getting killed. Or first floor fire, second floor vent or surge. We don't isolate the membrane. That's a bidirectional flow path. So if it's down here, if we take this opening and put it on the same floor, and we don't have wind, we don't have PPV, not that bad. Is it still a flow path? Yes. If we come in from this side, is the fire going to be pushing on us? Yes. If we have wind, that's where we have a concern. Do we get wind events here where we certainly could have just as deadly a flow path here as here? Absolutely. We get 30, 40 mile an hour gusts. If you get that on this side and we open on this side and don't put water in, we're in the flow path. So that's unidirectional versus bidirectional flow paths. So then we get into unidirectional versus bidirectional vents. Different. Essentially the same concept, but different. What is this?
It looks unidirectional.
Bidirectional.
What's that?
How much window is down there?
Yeah,
To
it's
here.
hard to tell.
Oh, okay. That's
So
bidirectional.
bidirectional, and we know what? Membranes. Well, we have membranes, not getting oxygen from anywhere else except out here. So it's limited growth fire based on oxygen consumption.
That would be a great transition with that.
Yes. So Stan talks about venting versus vented, and that words matter. The concept doesn't matter that much, or excuse me, the words don't matter that much, the concept is what matters. When you have fire, say this circumstance, is this venting or vented? Venting. It's not vented because there's more pressure. Again, it comes back to pressure. There's more pressure in that room than this hole can take up. Just like when we do roof ventilation. If we do a 4x4 hole on a fully involved room, there is more pressure in that room, which is what they found out why vertical vent doesn't work as well as we thought it did, is because it's venting, it's not vented. When this vents and it's released enough heat, if this was twice the window, and now we've got, smoke coming out, that is a vented room. This is a venting room. And the words, again, don't matter. We're not expecting that the IC is going to tell us whether the room is venting and vented. We just need to identify that this is a full growth fire, and it's hot. So this is a unidirectional vent, right? We know that we have open membranes. That the fire is getting oxygen from somewhere else in the building. So back to the flow path concept. The reason that we can't identify them and get out of them is because it reaches up to 18 miles an hour in some of the disc tests. It's just like when it's 50 degrees out on the river and no wind, it's not that cold. You get an 18 mile an hour wind blowing that wind across you, that's wind chill, right? The same thing applies with heat. When you have heat going over a surface, it's increasing that heat exponentially. That movement across you is increasing heat. So now, when you're getting 1,000 degrees pushed over you, with no speed, you're getting 1,000 degrees. You can put it 18 miles per hour. Now it's rapidly heating you faster than you can identify and get out. So that's why guys they find them dead right where they got hit by the flow path. I know several people watched it. The fire in California, the NIST review, ATF review of the fire that happened down in California. So 3-story beach house, fires on the seaside. The IC has no way to do a walk around because it's buildings and buildings and buildings. So he doesn't see that there's a huge fire in the basement, which is all floor to ceiling windows out the backside. So crew goes in, they identify that it is in the basement. They go in A to C down the stairs. About when they hit the bottom, mid-stairs, those windows break. When those windows break, the fire goes up the stairs, and they got something like 5 million BTUs all at one time. So we don't have enough water. No matter what we brought in there, those guys don't live. We have to identify it before it happens. We're going to talk about that. So hollow core interior doors. So again, back at Hatfield, he was at if you guys don't know, he's a big truck guy out of California, chief, written books and stuff. Taylor had to take his captain's academy. I'm kind of jealous about that, but he was at the NIST studies, and he said that they found out about this hollow core door by accident. So they were running a fire in a room, and they said, hey, look at this room over here. So they had a room at the other end of the hall. They had a fire. So they had a fire here on the same floor. They had another room down here with a hollow core modern door, the typical interior house door. So this room gets to flash over, and they've got temperatures of the high 90s in this room. It comes out the hallway. They reach high temperatures in the hallway. It never gets over, like, I can't remember, 120 or 130 degrees. So they proved by accident that an interior hollow core door, people can live when there's a full flashover in the room next door, which matters. It matters to us for victims. It matters to us for vendor search. It matters for us if we get trapped and we got to go in a bedroom. We know just by shutting the door, it gives us time, right? So that was pretty awesome that they found that out without even really testing it. So again, some of these were gone over in the ATF videos. These were all flow path beds. Universal rules of ventilation. So ventilation does not equal cooling, and that's short term. So I'll tell a story. Tyler again. We were out at Burbank for their burn day, and it was B shift day. So we're in there and we're running the prop, and I'm kind of trying to figure out the prop. I haven't ran it much. So the fire's going full, it's hot in there, and I'm trying to show that, like the NIST studies say, ventilation does not equal cooling. So I'm trying to illustrate the point that the NIST studies found ventilation does not equal cooling. So I'm opening the hatch over the fire, and everybody's like, oh yeah, and I'm saying, hey, see, it doesn't change the heat in here. And so we get done, and everybody leaves, and Tyler's like, hey, I just got a question, I had my hand up, and it was actually getting a lot cooler when you were opening that vent. And I was like, oh man, why? That doesn't make sense. They just tested all this stuff. So I thought about it a lot, talked to a couple different people, and looked up some stuff on the internet, searched some stuff, and what we were seeing was a short-term effect. So, and this is not new. This is not any sort of new understanding. Even the NIST studies didn't prove anything that we really realistically didn't know, but we open that up over the fire and we release all that heat and gas immediately out, right? So it gets cooler. That's what Tyler was feeling. It's getting cooler in here. But we've allowed the fire now that was starting to choke down in that environment. Now those gases are leaving, right? So that is a short-term change. But what that means to us is we know that if we put a crew over a fire with a chainsaw and they know the crew's pushing through the front door, they can open that up, vent it, get some short-term cooling and release better visibility, as long as that hose team is coming in, coordinated attack and taking the heat out of the fire. So, which is what the NIST study said. And when I went to Ed's class, he talked about how you've got these kind of three kinds of people. You've got people who are reading the NIST studies and they're like, yes, this is the greatest thing ever. And all the things that we were doing, vertical ventilation, all these things, they don't work anymore. Direct attack, it doesn't work anymore. They proved it wrong. And then you got your naysayers who are saying, no, we've been doing it right the whole time. And then you got, if you really look at the facts, you really read the studies, and you listen to the people that identified it, there's middle ground. We learned stuff about what we were doing. We can't ventilate a fire and expect that it's going to cool it, and then that's going to continue to work if we don't put water in the fire. We've known that, right? That's not new news to anybody.
Built the chimney.
Right, you built the chimney. Exactly. So, transitional attack works great if we have the ability to do transitional attack. If we have a basement fire that has no outside openings, we can't do a transitional attack, so we better still be pretty good at doing an aggressive offensive attack, right? Back to ventilation. So it equals cooling in a short term. Horizontal, vertical, and PPV will always increase fire size if water is not applied and the heat is on absorption. absorb. Again, we know that. Ventilation is a must and can improve coordination if coordinated with the tap. Outside vent man. So that's something we don't do that a lot of big cities do, is an outside vent man. If we're not doing a vertical attack, you've got a truck guy on the outside. When the attack team is pushing down the hallway, we're pushing towards the seat of the fire, ventilation. The outside truck guy, boom, that's your outside vent man. He opens it up. The attack team's moving in, they're pushing that environment out the window. That is the optimum attack for patient viability. If we have a patient, if we have the same call done 2 different ways, if we have a patient that's in this hallway and this room is fully involved, the door is open, the patient can still be viable outside the hallway, right? If we do a transitional attack out of a 3-foot by 4-foot window, where is that environment going to go when we start putting water into it?
Down and out.
Out into the hallway where the patient is, right? Not to say that that's wrong, but we have to understand that. If we come in and we call for an outside vent, as we're pushing down the hallway, they open up the vent, we come in and cool it. That is the optimal situation for that patient, right? So we have to understand that. There's no right way. There's no way that is, this one works every time for every situation. It's always the best way. It doesn't exist.
Right. Do we still have cellar nozzles? It's been a while since I've been at 1 and 3. But
We do.
They've taken the one off of station 1.
they took it off?
Yep.
Okay. It's just, I don't hear much talk about the cellar nozzle. It may be old fashioned or something like that, but that is, I've always kept it in my mind that that's an option to, make 3 cuts in a floor and drop that down for a basement, but.
Yeah, it is an option, absolutely.
Okay. But
It's an option that we don't have it anymore.
Only at 3? Oh.
I don't know about 3. I know we looked for it at 1 last shift and it wasn't there.
Okay.
So it's an option. I think probably the reason why it's gone away from is we can do the same thing with a nozzle, right? We don't have to have a fog nozzle or a cellar nozzle on there. But know that if we do that, if there's anybody in the basement, we have taken survivability out of the equation, right? We know that if we're putting water into that environment, there's been a lot of fires in the United States where the house is, nobody's in there. Go in, oh hey, there was a victim in there, right? So we have to keep that in mind when we're applying water without being at the seat of the fire. So Thornton's rule, which the rule is not important to remember, but what is important to remember is ventilation profiles, and this is again going back to that individual size up that, and we kind of talked about this on C shift, and they said, well, the incident commander does the size up and he relays that to the crew. Well, I guarantee when Tom comes back from size up, he doesn't go, yeah, it looks like you've got a bathroom there, a bedroom there, a center hallway, you've got 25% ventilation profile. But if we've got a fire and we can see all those things on the A side, he can tell us what's on the C side, and we know a lot of things going into it. Whether we're going into a bedroom, where the bedrooms are, all those things is that individual size up, but also should be, what is our ventilation profile? So the 10, 25, 50 rule. So door, we're looking at 10% of a typical door. 10 to 25, you've got a door and you've got some windows. And then above 50 is you've got doors and all windows totally out. So keep in mind, modern homes, like in my living room, I've got 3 4-foot by 5 or 6 foot windows, 3 right on top of each other. If you pull up, and it's on my backside, but if you pulled up and those 3 windows are blown out, guaranteed you have a 25% or more or greater ventilation profile. So above 10% is what they call extreme fire growth. We know that when we get past 1 hole opening, that we're going to starting to see that extreme fire propagation. So with ventilation, there's 7 priorities. Improve the visibility, release pressure, dilute the gases, control fire flow, improve viability for victims, prevent flashover, and exposure protection. So all these things are referencing a box. So when we talk exposure, there's interior exposures, there's exterior exposures. Interior exposure, if this room is on fire, that room next door, if we vertically ventilate, we've protected that exposure better because we're drawing that, like Tom said, up the chimney, so then we have to put water on it. We're diluting gases, so this is a big one for us because we know people are getting killed in flow paths, in gas explosions. So we vertically ventilate, We've diluted those gases, we put water on it, we've taken the heat out, we're in a pretty safe environment. So contraindications, AEIOU, just like it, for the medics, AEIOU tips. So attic fire, exhaust less than 1.5 times the intake, imminent or confirmed rescue, occupancy overpressure, and unable to locate the fire. So those are all don't do things with PPV. I can't remember why that's there.
Bidirectional or unidirectional?
It's bi currently, but it's,
Moving towards you.
yeah, it looks like it's about to, it's hard to tell.
Windows over windows, is it blown construction or modern?
I think it's offset.
I think
Yeah,
it is
they're
too.
all-
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about?
Professional firefighters depend on tactics based on knowledge. Novice firefighters depend on luck. Again, we talked about this. Anybody who's been doing the job for a while has been in that situation where we went blindly into a building, no idea where the fire is, zero visibility, you can open and close your eyes, you don't know if they're open or closed, and we were successful. We went in and put the fire out, right? We know now there's a lot of people that were not successful doing that. Again, it goes back, I can't remember if I've told this story before, but Mark Emery, one of the writers of ITAC, he talks in one of his articles about his dad. So his dad was an LA firefighter in the 50s. I never knew this, but before there was open cabs, there was actually closed cabs. So they went from the tops being off to a closed cab. So in the 50s, they had closed cabs. They got out in LA, the officer did his 360, he sized up, he identified the strategy, and then he went back to the firefighters who were still sitting in their seats and said, all right, this is what we're gonna do, boys. And they go in, so they sat there while the officer identified strategy. So that didn't last very long before they came up with the quick attack concept. So they wanted the cabs open so that firefighters could get off sooner. So that's into the 60s and 70s is where we started to see those pre-deployment of tactics. So we get on scene, we grab inch recorders, we go through the A side every time regardless of what's going on. And we did that for a long time, for a long time until recently. So, and what they realized is that nobody was identifying strategy, and that's what they realized with the whole ITAC concept, the blue card concept, all those is about an officer going around, identifying the problems, and picking a strategy before he picks a tactic. You can't say we're going to go through the A side and go with a transitional attack through the A side, or a direct attack through the A side with a Z pattern on every fire, right? That is a tactic, not a strategy. So that's what the fire service did for 40 years is we pre-assigned tactics, and it worked pretty well for most of us. Some of us didn't work for, those guys died. And one of the reasons that they pointed to on all of them was size up, identification of strategy, and the incident commander being inside the fire, fighting fire, because that was a pre-assignment. So our best practices. Coordinated after teammates push the seat and calls for vertical ventilation or the outside vent, or if we don't have the manpower, then they push through, they put the fire out, they take the window, and they do horizontal ventilation, right? So close to the seat, opposite of the interior hose line, that's where we should be outside venting. Size of the hole based on need. So again, we can't fall back on, this is what we've always said, 4x4, that's a residential cut. That's what's in IFSTA, that's what we do, right? Well, you cut a 4x4, and you've got black smoke filling both sides, it's boiling out of there. Is that enough? No, it's not. So we need to double that. We need to go to 8x8. This is a starting point. It should not be, we cut a 4x4 hole, we've achieved ventilation. No, we haven't. We just put a 4x4 hole in the roof. Now, if we put a 4x4 hole in the roof, we got a big smoke release, you've got sun smoke coming out of it, visibility is improved on the inside. Now we've achieved ventilation. It shouldn't be based on 4x4, that's a starting point, that's a guideline. So moving back into suppression, Chief Onwood, one of the chiefs at, where is he chief at?
Everett, wasn't it?
Everett, yeah. He always asks the question, how much fire can you put out? It's not a trick question. Right now, with our trucks, with what we have on there, if you pull a pre-connect, how much fire can we put out?
rooms, 600 square feet.
Yeah, Jack's exactly right. How do we know that?
NFA.
What?
NFA.
NFA. So I've heard the comment a million times, I don't bring a calculator to the fire. Well, you don't need to. If you understand this and understand your capabilities, you don't need to bring a calculator to the fire. You understand, looking at a house, what size handline you need and its capabilities. If we don't do this, again, we're just guessing. We're putting wet stuff on red stuff. So length times width divided by 3. Everybody knows that equation, right? It's the NFA equation. It's right on the ITAC board. So what does that give us? And the other part of this that we often leave out is there's caveats to it. So one of the biggest caveats that we often forget that's really important is 50% or less involvement. So if you have a room that's 100% involved, this doesn't work anymore. We cannot pull up and say, all right, that's 10 by 20, let's divide that by 3. That's going to get, it doesn't work. It's outside the parameters of what NFA tested. So to figure out what Jack came up with, we know that we have 200 GPM nozzles. So we can just flip this, so this equals GPM, and you don't have to remember the math part of it, but so we can flip that and times our GPM, which is 200, times 3 equals 600, which is what Jack came up with. That's 600 square feet of involvement, 50% involved, so that's a 1,200 square foot room. So a 1,200 square foot room, which is about any residential room in Pasco that's not a mansion, 50% involved, we have the capabilities, which is 3/4 line.
What does the 3 represent?
That's just the equation that they tested. When they did the NFA in 1960s, they tested how much water does it take to create this fire. This is the equation that they came up with. So you can reverse it and find out what your capability is with the lines we have. How many times do we get 200 GPM out of our inch-3/4 nozzles? Never. Never. And people, it's funny because I've heard several people say, yeah, you put these signs up, people are like, nope, it's wrong. It's not wrong, it's freaking math. I'm telling you, it's not wrong. So,
Watch your language, it's being recorded.
that's why I said freaking. So at 200 GPM, you lose 31 PSI per 50 foot. That's 120 PSI out of a 200 foot pre-connect. 120 PSI. That's why we don't get 200 GPM out of them, because we don't pump that high. We can't handle the lines that high. That's why the whole combination nozzle, all the things that they sold us on that we all believe that's in the text is wrong, because we never pump them like that. We can't. Anybody in here ever pump at 220 PSI? No way, right? We have to get 100 PSI at the nozzle for most of those to get that gallonage. We're not anywhere near that. So this is actually misleading somewhat.
So is this where you start talking about 2-inch handlines?
Yes.
Oh, segue.
No, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so 2.5. This is another thing, another reason why solid bores, you can like them or not like them, but on a 2.5-inch line, they make more sense. So we're only getting 50 more gallons per minute out of a 2.5-inch line, out of a combination nozzle, and that's pumping at the required pressure to get it. So when we use a 2.5, what are the 2 things that we need out of it when we decide to go with big water? There's 2 things that we need. When you say I need a 2.5 versus inch-3/4, there's 2 things I need out of that line. Gallons, we need water, and reach. Pressure and reach, right? Commercial occupancies, pressure and reach. Do we get that with a combination nozzle and 2.5? The same line with a solid bore nozzle can do up to 380 gallons per minute with further reach. So I get there is definitely benefits in the inch-3/4 line to have a combination nozzle. There's no doubt benefits. But when we go to that 2.5-inch line, defined by what we need it for, that combi nozzle does not meet our needs. So our Rams 500, our deck gun 750 to 1,000. And this is where that whole 2-inch hose, that whole thing came with. C-Shift tasked me to go and talk to Chief about the 3-inch on the master strings. And Chief's take on it, which is absolutely justifiable, is that we're missing this middle line. So we go from, all right, either we're always using inch quarter line or we're always pulling the master stream. We need something in between this, because to get the 500 GPM out of that ram, you have to pump that 2.5, again, almost 200 PSI. To get it out of the 3-inch line, we could be down, the pressure, the PSI friction loss is a difference of about, I think it's 20 on the 3-inch and it's 60 on the 2.5-inch. It's a big change.
So are you proposing smooth bore on 2.5 interior?
If it's me, I'm not.
I read that report too. I read that paperwork, and it basically said smooth bore is the best.
It did, and obviously that's one person's opinion. For me, if I'm going into a big box, my call is going to be smooth bore on 2.5 inch every time, just based on what I need out of it. We can skip forward a little bit. All right, we're almost there. Appreciate you guys staying awake. All right, so GPM versus BTU. This is again Mark Emery. No hose line on the contemporary fire ground should be charged to flow less than 200 GPM. We know we are not doing that ever. And, you know, we look back, we've had officers who have said, you know, I only like 80 PSI on my line. That's not safe. It's not about what you like. It's about what is the safest thing for your crew or your victims that you're going in. If you're not good at flowing water with a nozzle that's charged to 150 PSI, then you better get good at it, because you owe that to your crew, and we owe that to people going in. If we have if the pumper is charged to 80 PSI, and we go 200 foot into the line, we are nowhere even close to this number. We're not being safe. That is a safety thing. And that's not me talking, that's Mark Emery, pretty smart dude. So we won't get too much into this, space versus cooling. The thing that I want to talk about real quick before we finish was about the conversation that Mike was talking about when we were talking about fog versus straight stream. And straight stream not being necessarily solid bore, but just a straight stream on a combination nozzle versus a fog stream. So when we go with, Iowa attack, that's the other thing we don't talk about very much, is NFA attack is a straight stream application. Okay, that's a straight stream to the seat of the fire. An Iowa attack is that 15 to 30 degree fog where we know there's no life in there, and we open up a door, we fog that baby out, we put a lot of water in there, and then we shut the door, let the steam go to work. We get our, you know, if it's that hot, we can get up to 4,200 times steam conversion. Are we taking the heat out of the fire or the oxygen?
Displacing
The oxygen, exactly. And so that's where, again, this whole confusion comes with a fog stream absorbing heat. A fog stream is far more efficient at expanding, absolutely. But how much water, or how much heat does a small particle of water absorb versus a straight stream? A lot less. So in the Iowa equation, right in how it's talked about, you're taking the air out of the fire. You're expanding your fog stream. You're taking all the extra environment out of that room. That equals the cooling. So right in the IFSA text, I couldn't believe I read this, but basically what this says is what I just said. Smaller surface area will absorb heat less efficiently. So solid stream more compact, has smaller surface area, will absorb less heat efficiently. A fire stream is ineffective unless it can reach the fire, okay, important, enough water to absorb heat being produced. In some situations, a fog stream might be evaporated before a root stream being in the field. A solid stream is required just to reach the fire. So what does that tell us? If we're on a fog stream, can we absorb the heat? No. We can expand the water, but we're not getting that heat absorption. So that whole left for life, we're going to turn, I mean, honestly, anybody in here, I've said it, left for life, right? That's what we're all taught. How many people, if they were getting burnt over, would go left for life right now and go, I think I'm safe? Anybody? I've said it. I used to think that that's what they taught us, left for life, right? That's going to keep us safe. No, it's really not. It's really going to steam burn the crap out of you. So the whole left for life thing, again, it's just not accurate. So we know that if we can't reach the seat of the fire, it doesn't matter if those small particles are more efficient if they're just expanding here. If we're spraying from here, the fire is here, and all of that water is expanding here and dropping our environment, nothing's getting to the seat, what are we accomplishing? The answer is nothing. So, how much water can 1 gallon absorb? So about 10,000 BTUs. And the number isn't really important. What's important to remember is that when they did this test, the ASTM 119, is that they did it with wood cribbing. That wood cribbing, 1 pound absorbed 8,000 BTU, or excuse me, 10 pounds absorbed 8,000 BTUs, or put out 8,000 BTUs. The modern poly stuff is double, so that's what's important. It takes 2 gallons of water to absorb what we used to absorb with 1. That's the takeaway. The numbers are not the takeaway. Again, you don't have to bring a calculator to understand that if I have my pecan, it's going to take me twice as much water to absorb what it would have 20 years ago. Charles' law. Again, the law and the numbers are not important. So Charles' law says, and this is supposed to be this thing that goes shoo shoo, every 459 degrees you get a gas doubling. Oh yeah, you guys are going to
He needs to run to the station and grab his rig. Do you want to have Tyler drop him off? Or you want him to take the grass rig?
I don't want you to have the grass rig, Mike, I don't want to.
I was just thinking, what's easiest?
It's not like it's red flag warning or anything.
He can take the rescue truck.
Just tonight.
2841.
All right, so the last thing we'll talk about, Charles' law, every 459 degrees we have a gas doubling. So again, the law and the numbers are not important. What's important to understand is that when we reach flashover, the size is expanded 3 times. That goes back to the pressure. There's more pressure that we can relieve. We can't put pressure on pressure. So 4x4 hole in a 1,000-degree environment will not be sufficient for ventilation. If we put water on it and we take that 1,400-degree fire back down to 425 degrees, we've shrunk it 3 times. Now that 4x4 hole works really well. That's why that coordinated attack is really critical. So we talked about that. So, if you haven't seen this, this is nozzle forward. This is these guys moving the 2.5 inch and flowing water at the same time. It just talks about who they are, what they're doing. So, that's 2.5 inch line, they're flowing water and moving forward, and pretty easily too. Yes, sir.
Got a mute button?
So again, the thought of, we can't move 2.5, it's too big, there's too much hose, it's too heavy. We don't know how to do it efficiently as a fire service. But these guys have proven, if you understand and learn how to move it, you absolutely can move 2.5 inch with the manpower we have. One of the comments was, when we were talking about 2 inch and FDNY with 2 inch, well, we're not FDNY. No, we're not. So what they do with 10 guys, we got to do with 3 guys. But that's not to say we can't do it. We just got to figure out how. We have to practice it. We have to get good at it. If we say we can't do it, FDNY is bigger than us, then we pretty much just turn our brains off and say, all right, we're not good. We're not good like them. Well, we can be. We just have to adapt some things. They also run 30 calls a day, and we have the ability to train every day. So there's a lot of things that we have on our side that they don't. They don't get to go out behind their station and move hose like we have the ability to do.